and I'm a designer and co-founder of Trajna Association, currently working with invasive plants on Crater, a new production space in Ljubljana. I'm here together with my co-host Alisa Denise from Eclipta Herbal. We have joined our efforts to put together this series of international virtual lectures to present various earth workers as necessary practitioners of the land. Our endeavor provides a collective platform to share our values and approaches to the work we do regarding holistic approaches and understanding with novel ecosystems. We have enabled this series of virtual lectures happening across continents and various time zones to inspire our colleagues and future friends to learn from each other and collectively think of how our local actions with invasive plants might kick off a bigger movement in the future. We're grateful for all of you joining us today and by doing so, supporting our efforts in challenging the present paradigm regarding invasive plants and their capital-centric management strategies. Invasive Species Creative Proposals series has been kindly supported by the RUC project, a network of art and culture research centers working on crossroads of art, science, and technology. And today I have the honor to introduce you to my colleague, Dr. Rozalija Cvejic, a teaching assistant at the University of Ljubljana biotechnical faculty at the Department of Agronomy. Rozalija's work focuses on participatory environmental planning and agriculture in urban and rural settings, with an emphasis on irrigation development, flood and water management, ecosystem services, and climate change adaptation. We have invited Rozalija to speak about her team's pioneering research, which explores the potential of using Japanese knotweed to produce an organic fertilizer. The tests have proven that this invasive plant, which contributes to acceleration of soil erosion and has a major effect on soil nutrient availability, could also become a suitable alternative to farmyard manure in urban ecosystems. And just before we start, I would kindly invite you, all of you who are listening today, to send us the questions in the chat and share any relevant links with each other. At the end of the session, we will also open the stage for the 15 minutes to address the questions from the public. And now I would kindly invite Rozalija to start with her lecture. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gaia. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rozalija. I sit here in Ljubljana, University of Ljubljana Biotechnical Faculty, Department of Agronomy. As Gaia said, I'm a teaching assistant, and thank you very much for this nice introduction. Nobody introduced me so nicely until now. And thank you very much for this invitation. I have to admit, I haven't joined any of the lectures that were before this one, but from what I read, I think it's a really good initiative. And it's amazing how we can just have this technology and be connected throughout the globe on the issues we are all concerned about. So as Gaia gave a small introduction, I'm going to be focusing agriculture and in fact urban agriculture, which is sort of a subculture in agronomy, where fertilization sometimes is a problem, so the availability of fertilizers, but at the same time, we have to be aware of the fact that somehow urban agriculture is over-fertilizing soil. This is something that research shows, but nevertheless, we're searching for new sustainable fertilizers that would support food production also in urban environments where other fertilizers involving cattle are not so easily available. Which is why we focused on finding local resources of nutrients. And in this respect, Japanese knotweed was tested. And I'm going to share today a little bit about this research. The research has been going on for a few years now, and yeah, it does seem as a promising material that we can use. Also, maybe in your cities, maybe we find something together today. So I wish to share with you my presentation, of course, sorry. Presentation. Share screen. Okay. Just give me some feedback, Gaia and Elisa, if this is okay. If I manage to set the
It's perfect.
Okay, good, good. So that you don't see that I will read out loud. So as maybe you know, Japanese knotweed. It looks like this. It's quite a big plant that invades cities, not only in US and Europe, all around the world. And it does really affect native biota diversity and activity. If it grows on the river banks, it increases soil erodibility. Because of its ability to absorb nutrients fast, it affects temporal availability of nutrients in soil. So it basically competes with the native biota. And this is how it changes ecosystem structure and function. We've tried different approaches to sort of manage Japanese knotweed. For example, this is the simplest would be to pull it with your hands out of the soil and then basically remove it to the compost or something like this. You could also dig it out because it has strong root system, and you really need to remove this to effectively manage it. Then, for example, mowing. This is very common in parks where the grass needs to be this high, a centimeter or so. And it's basically increasing the frequency of the required mowing in parks. We also tried grazing, maybe you know some examples, and where you have really extra big plantations of Japanese knotweed, you could also excavate the whole ground out. Gaia, you know about this method. We were covering it to see if it grows any slower after that. And some of the recent methods that have been used and approved use biological agents. But all these methods are, so you can't use just one method to be 100% effective. And even if you use all the methods in some sort of perfect recipe, still you don't really remove it 100%. But if you do manage to remove it to some extent, or to the extent you are comfortable with, then you actually need to restore the ground. You need to restore the ground, and not all the species that you're going to restore the grounds with are suitable. So you have to have species that really grow fast and basically outgrow the Japanese knotweed that's going to probably appear again on the grounds that were cleaned. So it's a big problem for land managers in the city, and we are trying to find ways how to live with Japanese knotweed. So is there anything that we can do with the plant, with the plant leftovers, so to say, so that they don't go unused to the landfills? And indeed, yeah, many positive examples exist already. maybe you know some of them. So the plant has already been used as medicine. It's been used as fungicide. Gaia, you know very well how you used it as paper. You can use it as a source of a textile and heating briquettes, carbon adsorbent. You see on the left side of the screen below, these are seedling cups for the planting of the plants in urban farming. So there's really quite a huge number of examples where this invasive species turned out useful. And from what I've seen, it was really important to involve community here. And it was really important to guide or engage the community in bringing out the ideas how we could use Japanese knotweed. New applications are being developed as we speak, and I will present you how we, together with community and our team of researchers, began to develop and test this plant as a potentially interesting source for organic fertilizer. So what we did was we used fermentation. We harvested and sun-dried the Japanese knotweed. Then we chopped it, added effective microorganisms, and let it ferment in barrel for a few months. Finally, we tested and produced organic fertilizer on soil in urban farming community with a fast-growing vegetable Chinese cabbage. So we were interested in the nutritious value of the organic fertilizer and if it somehow negatively affects the growth of Chinese cabbage. Why did we use fermentation and why did we use effective microorganisms? Some of you might be asking yourself at this moment. We used fermentation because the energy input is low. Okay, you will say with the composting, it's also a low energy input, but you don't need to, with fermentation, you don't need to mix the substrate. The release of gaseous compounds in the air is really low. Plant nutrients remain in the organic fertilizer in a greater extent than with composting. There is also low microbial degradation, and secondary products that we wish to have in the organic fertilizer develop. There is low carbon footprint. No pathogenic microorganisms develop in this acid environment. But it's also true that no high temperature is being used in the process, which means that you really need to harvest Japanese knotweed also only from, for example, 3 centimeters from above the ground and everything above. So only the green parts, not the roots, which might grow even after fermentation. Why did we use effective microorganisms? We used it to increase soil biological activity, physical and chemical properties of soil, and to increase plant growth itself. So let's see, what did we get? What sort of fertilizer was this? Here I present the major characteristics. In terms of nitrogen content was higher than in, for example, cattle farmyard manure, but it was similar to solid poultry or rabbit manure. CN was narrow. It means that nitrogen would readily mineralize after the organic fertilizer is applied in soil. The percent of dry matter was sort of similar to the composts, but a bit higher than in digestates. And phosphorus and potassium ratio was in line with the needs of vegetables, which take up, for example, 3 to 8 times more potassium than phosphorus. We applied this organic fertilizer, as I said, on a community garden together with the gardeners. So it was also basically a learning process. What can we do? What sort of materials do we have in urban environment that we can use for food production? And you can see here a little bit of statistics. Yeah, you can't see that I'm moving your faces around my screen. So in Ljubljana, Slovenia, there's approximately 35 hectares of municipality-owned land that is infected by Japanese knotweed and Bohemian knotweed, which means we have quite an area that we could harvest from. We did from the materials that from the organic fertilizer that we developed, we calculated what sort of application or the required application would we need if we would grow, for example, tomatoes, pumpkins, cabbage, paprika, cucumbers, which are really quite frequently grown vegetables in Ljubljana. And we do see that for a yield of 5 kilograms of vegetables per square meter, you would need an application of 2 kilograms of this organic fertilizer per square meter. And by doing this, you would cover all the needs of the nitrogen, but would cover, for example, 66% of phosphorus needs and 88% of potassium needs. Of course, this 2 kilograms per square meter is just an average. You can see here on the graph that some vegetables would require more, some less. For example, green beans less, tomatoes more. Okay. If we go to the potassium and phosphorus crop requirements, so you can see here that if you would apply 100% of nitrogen requirements, you would apply varying percent of phosphorus. For example, you would, for example, oversupply phosphorus requirements for potatoes, but you would undersupply the potassium phosphorus requirements for example, onion, green beans, carrots, zucchini. So you would basically would need to have another fertilizer to cover the what you are still missing to get the perfect yield. And it's the same for potassium. If you would cover with this organic fertilizer 100% of nitrogen requirements, you would oversupply tomatoes, and would be close to 100% for cabbage, cucumbers, and mangold, but you would undersupply green beans and carrots, for example. Okay, maybe this was a bit too fast, but we can go back if you wish afterwards in discussion. What I want to summarize is that this organic fertilizer does seem as a viable alternative to existing approaches. It has a simple production process, also a more mechanized approach could be used for harvesting the biomass that we could use then for producing this organic fertilizer. But we need to do the harvesting to interrupt the plant reproductive cycle. So it doesn't make sense to harvest after, for example, after it already produces the seeds, but you need to harvest it before, so for example, in flowering phase. It does have the potential to be a part of circular economy. It's definitely an interesting production idea. But on the other side, it does also retain this element where you can, where you don't need to use too mechanized approach. You can keep it simple, small production units, and you can actually focus on community involvement and how could community be involved in management of this plant in their own environment. I'm not sure if there is any possible reluctance of users. For example, urban gardeners, would they be reserved to use invasive plant as organic fertilizer? Yeah, there might be. We need to research this further, definitely, and see. If you want to have more details about this organic fertilizer, I can, of course, answer your questions, but you can also take time and to read more about this in Journal Agronomy, where we published this article. I think it's a good article because in introduction, it gives you a really good overview of what has been already done with Japanese knotweed and how do we use it in this moment. But it also provides more detail, yeah, of course, to the experiment we did in Ljubljana. So if this was satisfactory, I can return now the voice to you, Gaia. Or if anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Rosie, for your lovely presentation. Until maybe we have somebody raising the hand, just read the question that was posed by Roger. And it goes like this: without deliberately cultivating knotweed, is there enough of it to produce commercially sufficient quantities of fertilizer?
Yes, thank you very much, Roger. This is really a good question. It depends where you live, basically. In Ljubljana, as I said, we have 35 hectares of this, and from the calculation that we did and that you can find in this article, we would surpass our urban agriculture area considerably. So we have, for example, for 200 hectares. But if you live in a city that does not have this material, maybe it's not good to focus on Japanese knotweed. You could focus on any other invasive plant and consider using it in this way. In Ljubljana, yes, we have it enough to be, I think, commercially sufficient. But as I said, it depends where you live. For example, in Koper, which is on the coast, Slovenian city on the coast, they don't have any problem with this plant.
Do we have any questions from the audience today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I might, yeah.
I was waiting to see if anyone else did. Thank you so much. That was so great. I can't wait to read the article, and yeah, it's just amazing to see the scientific research on the levels of what it offers the soil, and the fermentation process is really interesting to me. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the way that you community organize, and that's been such a big part here in the US. Is a lot of this is put onto the hands of parks departments, which is tax funded and either state or government funded, and there's usually not enough hands on the ground. So I'd be interested just to hear how you implement that, and yeah, just some experience around that.
Yeah, another great question, Guy. I was partially involved also in this. We used, of course, this research was funded, but yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, funds are always a problem. So we managed to get sort of bits and pieces from different projects, and then we financed this sort of cross-cutting research, I would say, cross-disciplinary also. So for the collection of the material, we used funding from the municipality, which gave actually the funds to engage with community. And Guy, maybe you can provide more on the Podalšeno bivanje project, but it was basically to engage the community in thinking of how we can interact with Japanese knotweed. And then we also used, for example, practical practicants. I don't know if this is really a word from high school that were also involved in planting and irrigating. We had outcasts youth from Zavod Bob, which were again engaged in a few of the activities during the experiment. So in fact, I would say around 30 people collaborated actively. So from cutting the plant to producing the fertilizer, and then also, yeah, the laboratory analysis and everything that we did related to this, and setting up the experiment. I think it is really a nice project on how you can facilitate science, community interaction, and see, and also show that science is not somewhere there, but it's here in the community, and that community can actually contribute to developing new scientific findings. So yeah, it's important to engage.
I had one follow-up question. Thank you. I also just wonder if there's a way that your research and methodology could be replicated in other cities. I would be really super interested in that, and just implementing that research and continuing it. But have you done anything like that?
We have not. So this was a first phase that we did. We have not researched any further. Now we're looking for a way how to do it. We're basically joining together the ideas, because this pioneer research opened more questions than it closed. I have to warn everybody that it also has allelopathic effects, this plant. So it's not that you can use it without expecting any negative influence on the growth of the seedlings, for example. So the plants that you want to then eat. We tried this on Chinese cabbage, and we didn't see any negative effects, but we would need to test this organic fertilizer also on other plants. So I wouldn't be so, I wouldn't sleep peacefully to say so. If I would just recommend it, yeah, you can now use it. It's now developed. It still has a lot of work, but it does seem very promising in terms of how much nutrients this plant is able to harvest. It does really seem that it's a good opportunity to use it if it's available locally. There are also other considerations, for example, heavy metals. We have not focused heavy metals at all because the analysis for this is a bit more expensive. We didn't have the budget to do that. And we also went step by step. So this is another field of research that needs to be applied. But definitely, in terms of the process, the making of, you can repeat it.
Awesome.
We did it in a barrel, in a 60-liter barrel, so everybody is able to replicate this.
And then, and Diane also asked, are you harvesting by hand mostly for that fermentation process?
Yes, we harvested by hand. In this example, as I presented, this was harvested, basically using like scissors and materials that you have, that everybody has in their garage. But I mentioned you could use a more mechanized, a bigger machine, with which you could harvest a bigger patch. So we were working on a very small patch, but you have bigger patches growing alongside the river banks and highways, construction pits, where you have a uniform patch of Japanese knotweed, which you could basically mow with a bigger machine, and you would harvest more. We harvested only 100 kilos of fresh material, but you could harvest a lot more of this. In the article, you can find a calculation of what sort of yield can you expect in which growth phase of the Japanese knotweed. So it's not irrelevant if it's this high or if it's this high. Okay.
And then Carol asks, when harvesting the plant, isn't there a danger that it is just being spread even more, which you did touch on? You only use the above ground parts, but do you want to speak to that more?
Yes, we were really careful. We were really careful to cut above the air roots, and we didn't also use the ground roots. These are the parts of the plant that are invasive, and also because of the process. I said we used fermentation, and no high temperature is developed during fermentation. It's basically like 20 degrees Celsius. I don't know how to calculate this in Fahrenheit, so. But you need to be cautious, and you need to always harvest before it creates seeds. So because the seeds are something that can spread.
During the fermentation process, that there's so much breakdown of biomass and that sort of thing, that it also is another check to control spread, or no? I don't know.
We would need to test it. So for the method that we use, I would recommend not to use any below ground parts or seeds. But if you develop another method where you could apply, maybe one way would be to test if it's invasive, if the plant remains invasive, if you also harvest the seeds and use the same production process. You need to have sort of indoor experiment to do this, so not to spread it any further. Another idea is to develop another method that would develop at a higher temperature, where you could also, I'm trying to find a nice word for kill. Stop the reproduction cycle of the plant.
And then Diane has a follow-up question. Do you use a bubbler inside the barrel? I'm not sure what bubbler means, but do you?
I'm not sure what bubbler means, but maybe she can explain. We used a barrel, just screw cap barrel. We waited, so we layered the material with effective microorganisms, and then we covered it with plastic foil. Sorry for those that don't use plastic. It was really a small amount of plastic foil, just to make sure no air enters the process, the fermentation process. And we also layered this with water contained in another sack. So this was tightly pressed material, which was there fermenting for 2 months. 2 months on air temperature during summer. So around 25 degrees.
Yeah, and is there, so Guy just put, Lyndon asked if we can follow this research, and we have the link to the article, but is there any other way to follow, you know, upcoming things that are in the works?
Yeah, I will try to make it visible. But if you wish to get in touch, find new ideas for collaboration or so on, you can of course contact either Gaia, who is really the one of the team members, or you, Elisa. So I'm sure that together we are more powerful. I mean, everybody has different views and ideas, and I'm sure that we can construct an even greater idea out of this primary research, basically. There is one direct message from Catherine about the reluctance. She says she's researching participatory design and Japanese knotweed, and that she has found out that people in communities feel ashamed by showing or handling Japanese knotweed, being afraid to be considered as an outcast. Okay, yeah, I didn't know about this. It's an interesting view. Yeah, maybe Catherine can share a little bit more about this.
Thank you for today. It was really wonderful. I am researching for my PhD research at Glasgow School of Art, the Japanese knotweed and participatory design. And what I found out, I've been in contact with Japanese women because I thought that would be interesting to try the same, two of them together. And they didn't want to participate in my work in the participatory design community because they were anxious to be thrown out of their own community because of being around the Japanese knotweed. So there is a stigma on it, definitely. And I can remember the first time that I was in Glasgow walking around. I have a plot near Delmgrove Gallery with Japanese knotweed, and I followed the growth of the Japanese knotweed. And when I was walking around with Japanese knotweed in the pasta cafe, etc., going from the plots to the Academy of Art, people were saying to me, "Wow, Japanese knotweed, my, you're not allowed to enter." So there is a certain, maybe there's also a difference in between Ljubljana, where people are still a little bit closer to nature and the city life of Glasgow, but it's really a thing.
I find this view really interesting. From the literature that I read, I got the impression, I was only reading literature that I could find on Web of Science, basically. So I've missed probably a lot of community opinion regarding this. But it's interesting because I thought that Japanese knotweed in Japan is not really considered invasive. It's just a plant that is there, and it's also used for medicine and so on. So that you would be removing it might be, yeah, not in line to what they see in relation to the plant. But
Well,
for example, in Ljubljana, yeah,
in
sorry.
the UK, there's a fine on having the Japanese knotweed, and there has been a law written about the Japanese knotweed, so that makes it much more heavy, stringent.
Yeah, we don't have this law in Ljubljana yet, but when you were saying that maybe we are still more connected to the nature and we're trying to find the values of the plant itself, I wouldn't say this is a general opinion, but Gaia, maybe you can correct me. I think the public authorities are basically trying to remove it because it's growing too fast, for example, in parks. But community and, for example, designers like Gaia really showed, and I have to say this was really pioneer work, that you can use it for something, and it's not only waste that needs to be in landfills. So I wouldn't say it's a general, general
maybe, yeah, just to follow on your thoughts, I think it's quite a big difference in the way like UK is managing the plant and Slovenia, because in a way I know that you have this law, and then I also heard that you would use like herbicides, and that there would be like strong or like various services developed that would then be kind of that you could call, and that they would eradicate Japanese knotweed with some sort of incredibly toxic things that would then in the end cause that nothing would grow on the land for more than 3 years or so. So I think like this sort of really almost like violent politics that have been applied to this plant in the UK maybe causes then also a bit of a stronger stigma. In comparison to Slovenia, I think we don't have such a strong management strategy that would be applied, and we would never, for example, even use the herbicides. Like the politicians wouldn't even opt for that. So maybe that'd be like the reason why this wouldn't be so present locally in Slovenia.
Andrei has asked another question. If we noticed any other life activity enhanced, induced by the fertilizer, for example, on animals or fungi. This is a great research research focus. We have not, in this research, we were not able to fund this, but we were considering this, and we know that there is definitely an effect on the soil biota.
I think I missed Roger's comment and question from earlier, but he's saying, with COP26 later this year, do you agree that it is important that everyone who cares about climate change and loss of biodiversity should write personally to their political representatives and make sure they know their views? Politicians will only take decisive action if we tell them what we think. Politicians need to know we are tired of rhetoric and we demand real action. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, me too.
And I think Alicia would like to have a question.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks. I just had my picture up because I think my voice will be clearer without it. But thanks for doing this today. I'm in the Eastern United States, and it's Japanese knotweed is very invasive here, and it's all over our riverbanks, and it causes erosion and it continues to spread. I'm definitely of the school of thought that I do a lot of invasive plant management, but I don't like to use chemicals. In fact, I don't use them anymore. I did when I was working, and I just found it to be like, you know, like Gaia said, it's violent. It's violence on the land. But I'm kind of in this place where it's hard for me to understand how to work between like government contractors and just the way that the industry is run in the United States, at least on the East Coast. And it seems like there's not a, I would love, here's my question. I would love an example of like maybe a middleman that goes in and harvests for medicine production. And I'm wondering if anyone's seen a model for that, because here, you know, it's all about speed and about getting the thing done and using machinery and chemicals and all of that. Even the National Park Service is like that, and NCRS here. And they would really rather not take time to handle the plants with respect. I'm wondering if any of y'all have seen an example anywhere in the world for that I could maybe read about or reference. Thank you.
There is a reference in the article regarding medicinal use and harvesting of Japanese knotweed. But it doesn't give so many details, and I'm not sure if Japanese knotweed is actually grown for the medicine. I wouldn't be comfortable using it knowing that it has been grown right next to the highway. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I can't give you any advice on the medicinal use. I'm not a pharmacist. But there is definitely one or two references in the article regarding medicinal use. Maybe you can check.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into it. Not so much, I'm sorry, my question was confusing the way I said it. I'm not so much asking about the medicinal use, but if you've seen a business model that has somewhere between, you know, harvesting for whatever fertilizer or whatever, so that you can get that out to the market that's making the fertilizer or making the, but in the US, you know, they're going to send National Park Service in, and they're likely going to mow it or spray it foliar. It's on all of our waterways here. It's like very common. So it's more like is there a business model of somebody who might go in just to harvest the plants for secondary uses, I guess is my question.
I don't know any concrete models, but we were discussing about this on several occasions, because we're wondering how could we make this in a business plan, or how would our ideal business setup look like if we would be producing this organic fertilizer. It wasn't so much about establishing one, but exploring what different types would be possible and suitable in our environment. And there were some ideas using such management companies, as you mentioned, Alisa, that are not really taking care of what they're doing, just harvesting, and here is the material. To engaging, just community into it. So there are smaller communities that are interested in that are potentially interested in doing such work. But we were thinking also in terms of how big do you want the production unit to be. If it's really small, then you really have the opportunity to engage everybody. If it's micro scale, but if you start to scale it up, then maybe you have problems, or maybe you have to think in different, with a different set of possibilities.
I'll also just say that that's one of the biggest reasons we're doing this series of talks, and I really feel that this is like really the culmination of a lot of the creative work that's going around doing this kind of work, and just the creative applications and how we can implement that into what is being done now as far as the negative aspects, like paradigm shifting away from that. So that's really one of the biggest reasons we want to do this series of talks, to sort of start to approach our state and government and that does this land management, to help them understand a little better how we can approach it differently in a less violent and toxic way. So that's what we hope with this series, and it will continue. And we really hope to have Rozalija present again, maybe on some other further research that they'll be doing. And so, I would just continue to come to the talks, because they're providing solutions. And so our previous talks are also talking about different applications, business or medicinal or otherwise. So that would be my suggestion. So.
And maybe if you would be interested, like into looking into the project that Strina was involved in, which was called Applause, which was actually looking at the way of how to engage the citizens of Ljubljana into collecting the plants, the invasive plants, and then also kind of designing useful products and other things out of it. So I'm happy to share you the links if this could be somehow useful on this like business level question. And I agree completely with Alisa that this is the question I think it's one of the most important questions of how do we work with them, basically. As Rozalija was already mentioning, if we scale it up, then we're kind of contributing to the problem again. So like fine managing the business model would be something that I think we're kind of co-developing now together. But I'm happy also to share at some point if you are interested in what we do at Strina, and if this somehow can be useful for your own research as well.
And we're hoping to get a presentation from someone at Kudzu Culture. They are currently developing business models to sell kudzu root, wild harvested kudzu root, for medicinal and other purposes, paper, everything. And I'm equally doing those types of things with invasive plants and medicine specifically, because I'm an herbalist, but yeah, so thanks for that question.
Can I just have like one burning question, Rozalija, before we finish?
Yeah, please.
I'm just curious because I'm not like a scientific, or I'm not a farmer basically, and if I would like to use the fertilizer, I would like to know if there is like a way to understand if the soil is over or under fertilized. Is there like a tool, or I don't know, some sort of a common knowledge to understand if the soil would need the fertilizer or not?
Yeah, good question. This brings us to the first sentence. One of the first sentences. Yeah, urban agriculture is usually over fertilized. I mean, we know this from Ljubljana. We did few analysis of soil. I've seen these reports also from Netherlands, from other countries. So I was speaking about how much fertilizer would you need for for soil in a specific class of fertilization class. So of course, I mean, if you are a good grower, you need to start off with the material that you know, and then add the fertilizer. And of course, the analysis for basic nutrient availability is there. It's I can't tell you how to do it on your own, but I know we have laboratories and analysis available, and methods available to do this. And it's a good point that you've raised. Yeah, we should really start with basic knowledge. What do we have in soil at the moment, and what do we want to grow there, and how can we enhance the growth? For example, in our experiment, we were working with soil that was really undersupplied with nutrients, and you could see how inappropriate that soil was for urban agriculture. We tried to grow a plant that really consumes a lot of nutrients in short time, for example, Chinese cabbage, and the control which we didn't fertilize did not develop well. So you really need to be you really have to have basic knowledge of what you have in soil. I don't know, did I answer your question?
I think I need a lab then.
Yeah, you need a lab, definitely. But you can do nitrates, you can do with fast tests by yourself. So there are some methods that you can apply.
Oh.
If there are questions, you can chime in. You don't have to put in the chat.
So if there are not any more questions, I see people are leaving, saying thank you, great presentation, I have to leave, and so on. I would like to thank everybody before everybody leaves. And of course, thank you, Gaia and Lisa, for hosting the event today. I enjoyed, I hope you did too, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you, Rosie, for your lovely presentation. It was really cool to see it come all together basically, and I'm really looking forward to see like what the research leads to. What are the next steps? I would also like to remind everyone who was here with us today that the video will be shared on the YouTube, and the recording will be sent to all of you who participated at the lecture. And yes, before we close this session, I would also kindly like to invite you to save the date and join our next virtual lecture, which will explore the potential of weeds in the skincare industry. On November the 18th, we will be joined by Mariana Santos, a woman, a mother, and the face behind Herbfol, a brand of skincare products which she created to honor weeds and their potent magic. So it will be really interesting. And just before the end, I would like to mention that if you feel this work and this creative series provides an important work, please consider supporting us, me and Alisa, by purchasing our goods and services that are available at ecliptaherbal.com/shop, and Trajna's paper from invasive plants that is available on knotweedpaper.com. Have a wonderful week, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.